online, and she is a virologist. Initially, she graduated as a chemist. Then he studied biotechnology at the Institute of Biotechnology of UNAM. She is working now at the University of Mexico City, the Autonomous University of Mexico City. And he is, as I say, a virologist who is specialized in the evolutionary dynamics of RNA viruses. And she has been a very important component of the Mexican effort on genomic surveillance of SARS-CoV-2. Please, Selene, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm going now to share my presentation. I hope it goes fine. So here we are. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the diversity of SARS-CoV-2 in Mexico and the analysis we have been doing to understand its dispersion and evolution. So first, I would like to start talking a little bit about COVID-19 in Mexico. So far, there have been over 5.5 million of confirmed cases and over 3,000 deaths. Let me just get my pointer going. Okay. There you go. In Mexico, there have been, as you all may be aware, 4 epidemic waves. The first one started around April 2020 and ended by September of that year. The second one was started around November 2020 and ended until March 2021, so it was a very long wave. The third one occurred during the summer of 2021, and the fourth one started by the end of December 2021 and is just ending. As you can see in these graphs, is the first wave that had the highest daily number of new cases reported, so it grew really rapidly. And then but fortunately is the one that has the least new deaths daily report. For those of you that don't know this, in Mexico, the National Institute of Diagnostic and Epidemic Reference is in charge of all surveillance, epidemiological surveillance in Mexico. However, to aid in this effort, the Mexican Consortium for Genomic Surveillance was confirmed in early 2021. From this point, the Mexican Consortium, or CoV-MEX, has reported more than 19,000 sequences out of the about 57,000 available sequences in Mexico. So today I'm going to use all sequenced genomes in Mexico to show how the different lineages have circulated in our country, but a large part of this work was possible to the efforts of CoV-MEX. Also, as you all may be aware, the emergence of SARS-CoV-2 lineages has followed 2 distinct patterns. So the first SARS-CoV-2 sequence was reported early in January 2020, and in the first few months of the pandemic, the virus have divided into 2 clades, clades A and B, as for the nomenclature developed by the Pango system. But very soon after this virus reached Europe, a variant emerged that we call now B.1, which has become dominant in the world. most of the sequences of genome sequences that we are analyzing today and we are circulating today in the world descend from this lineage, and they are characterized by having this mutation in the spike protein in position 614. And throughout all of 2020, circulation of SARS-CoV-2 was characterized by the co-circulation of many variants. However, by the end of 2020, the report of lineages with particular characteristics started to emerge. So these variants are characterized by having a larger than expected number of new substitutions and also the ability to outgrow other variants and become dominant. And these emergent variants obviously include those that have been classified by the WHO as variants of concern. So alpha and beta were reported first in December 2020. And then in January, we had the report of the Gamma variant, by March, the Delta variant, and finally in November, the Omicron variant. But also other variants have also emerged that either circulate locally and have spread in different countries, outcompeting all other variants. And they share some characteristics with these variants of concern. So they have mutations that either allow them to escape the immune response or to bind with more affinity to the receptors. In Mexico, I'm going to show you also like these patterns of circulation of SARS-CoV-2 lineages. The first year with the co-circulation of different variants and how these more fit variants have emerged and circulated in our country. During the first year of the pandemic, genomic surveillance in Mexico was really limited. And as I showed you in this figure, for most of 2020, we had available around 200, 250 sequences. And sequencing only started to pick up around February 2021. But also we have a huge disparity in the geographical representation of those genomes. So while for Mexico City, for instance, we have over 1,300 sequences, for other states such as Michoacan, we only have 7 full genome sequences of SARS-CoV-2 for the whole year. But even with this limited data, it was pretty obvious that some important lineages started to emerge. So I show you here the lineages that circulated in Mexico for the first year of the pandemic, that is to say from February 2020, when the first case was reported in Mexico, to February 2021. And in particularly, it is pretty interesting, the emergence of one particular lineage, which is B11519, that accounted for almost 40% of all sequenced genomes in Mexico. And most remarkably, you can see that here in blue, the epidemic curve in Mexico, the detection of this lineage 519 corresponds to the beginning of the second wave of the epidemic in Mexico. In this figure, we show the circulation by time of all these lineages in Mexico with the relative frequencies. And you see that very soon after the detection of lineage 519, it is starting to spread and dominated by February 2021, all this SARS-CoV-2 circulation in Mexico. We carried several analyses to try to characterize the circulation of lineages in our country, and we built this phylogeny, maximum likelihood phylogeny, and show here in the bottom the relationship between two lineages that were very important in their circulation in Mexico, where it can be seen that lineage 519 seems to have emerged from lineage 222. Both of them, of those circulated primarily in Mexico, and particularly here in this tree that is just labeled or decorated with the region of Mexico in which the sequences were obtained. You see a lot of red, which represent the center of Mexico, particularly Mexico City. So these two lineages circulated mostly in Mexico City, in the center of the country, and also in the south, that is shown here in yellow. Whereas other regions of the country, such as in green, the Northwest, that was pretty well sampled through this period, has showed the circulation of multiple variants, but in particularly, I want to point out the presence in the Northwest of the epsilon lineages. Just for the relevance, we also included the very first sequences that were classified as the alpha variants that were isolated from the Northeast here in purple, and also one of the variants of interest, P2, that caused a small outbreak here in the west of the country. And we were particularly interested in these two lineages because when you go to the databases, you see that these lineages are classified or are annotated as lineages from the US and Mexico. But when you see the relative prevalences of these lineages in different countries, you see that they are really Mexican lineages. So lineage 222 reached its highest prevalence in July 2020 in Mexico, whereas in the US, it only reached a maximum of 1% of all sequenced genomes around December. But this is more striking for lineage 519, where by February 2021, it had reached almost a prevalence of 62%, whereas in the US, it only reached less than 3%. To try to understand a little bit better the reason behind the success of lineage 519 in Mexico, we look at the reported mutations for this lineage, and it shares two important mutations in the spike protein that are shared by some variants of concern. The first one is mutation in position 478, and this mutation is shared by the Delta variant and also by Omicron, and mutation in position 681, which is also shared by Omicron, Alpha, and Gamma. We believe that other lineages circulating in Mexico at this time were at a disadvantage against the newly emerged 519, which had this mutation that may have aided in its transmissibility. However, this variant, even though it had entered many other countries in Europe and in Latin America and also the USA, it was not as successful there. One observation that we found particularly interesting is that lineage 519 and the alpha variant co-circulated in Mexico from January to April 2021. In this graph, you can see the rise of 519 here in pink, how it started to grow and increasing its relative frequency in comparison to all other lineages circulating in Mexico, and it reaches its highest point in April 2021, where it accounted for around 80% of all sequenced viruses. Whereas alpha entered the country first in December 2020, but it started growing very, very slowly. and it only reached at its peak around 20% of all sequencing genome in May 2021. So when we wanted to see why this, how was the circulation of alpha and its distribution around Mexico, so we took only this period when alpha was at its peak. So that is from March to June 2021, a little bit of sequences from July. And when we look at their distribution in all Mexico, you can see that it reached very high prevalences in the north of the country. So particularly Chihuahua, where it reached about 40%, Tamaulipas also around 39%, and Baja California with 35%, were the states where it circulated the most. And these are states that are located at the US border. So we thought that maybe the entry or the source of these viruses that were circulating in Mexico, at least in part, came from the USA. After building a haplotype network of all alpha sequences that were circulated in Mexico, we identified different haplotypes. However, today I'm only going to focus on two of these haplotypes, what we call cluster 1 and cluster 5. So cluster 1 has a lot of sequences from states in the Northeast, shown in different shades of yellow, mainly Tamaulipas and Nuevo León. And then also show a subcluster of sequences from the south and southeast. So this is Tabasco in blue, and in this brown is Yucatan. Whereas in the case of haplotype 5 of cluster 5 sequences, it's composed mainly by samples from the northwest of the country, mainly Sonora, Sinaloa, and Chihuahua. And then it has a subcluster of sequences that were sampled in the center of Mexico, shown here in red and orange, which correspond to Mexico City, State of Mexico, Tlaxcala, Hidalgo, etc. So as you can see, this gave us the idea that maybe some of the alpha sequences that were detected in Mexico entered from the US and then spread towards the center and the south of the country. And we built some maps to try to show this relation. And for C1, for the cluster 1 sequences, we see that they started to increase frequency first in the period of March and April 2021, mainly in the state of Tamaulipas. By May, this was the most prevalent haplotype in the state of Tamaulipas and had started spreading elsewhere. And then by the period of June and July, it had reached some states in the southeast and other states in the north. Cluster 5 sequences were first detected in the northwest, mainly in Chihuahua, but also in Sonora and Sinaloa. By May, they can be observed in the center of the country, and by June, July, they have reached the south of Mexico. Of course, this is not the only entry point of SARS-CoV-2 sequences, particularly alpha sequences into Mexico. Other haplotype, for instance, haplotype 2, cluster 2, was first detected mainly in the state of Quintana Roo. In Quintana Roo, the tourist destination of Cancun is located, so this may be an entry point also for these viruses in Mexico. And in the following months, this haplotype spread to other states in the region. But altogether, these alpha sequences, this alpha haplotype, although they spread to other parts of the country, their highest prevalence was always in the northern states. So in the second year of the pandemic, we observed that it was characterized by the presence of dominant variants. No? And you can see here, this is a graph that goes from February 2020, when the first case was observed, to November 2021. And during the first year, although there were some very frequent variants, there was somehow a large diversity of lineage circulating in Mexico. After the appearance of lineage 519, this one became the dominant variant. And then we saw the entry into Mexico of the variants of concern. So we see here the entry of alpha and then gamma. And the case of alpha and gamma is very interesting because alpha was restricted to circulating mostly in the north of the country, while gamma was restricted to circulating mainly in the southeast of the country. But when Delta variant entered Mexico, it quickly became the dominant variant. And by August, even by July, but very clearly in August 2021, it has become the dominant variant and remains so until November. You may all be familiar with the fact that Delta has been divided into lineages to facilitate the tracking of their dispersion. So some Delta sublineages have circulated mainly in Mexico, and I just going to highlight two of those. This is work that we are still an analysis that we are still carrying out, but Delta sublineage AY.20 and AY.26 account for more than 70% of all Delta sequences reported in Mexico. And if you look in a region-wise fashion, you can see here that different regions of Mexico have a distinct circulation of these lineages. So here in yellow, it is depicted the variant 519. And you can see that in the center of Mexico, so this includes Mexico City and the south of Mexico, this was a very dominant variant. Not so much in the north of Mexico, either the northwest, but particularly in the northeast, it didn't reach its highest frequency. Its highest frequency was is below 50%. Then we have the entry of alpha here in lilac, and you see that its relative importance varies within regions, but in the northwest and northeast was where it achieved its highest frequency. And then gamma here in orange, it really dominated the southeast of Mexico, where from May to June 2021 was really the dominant variant. Finally, Delta, that is shown here in different colors because they represent different sublineages of Delta, but I only want to focus on two today, is AY20, which was most dominant in the center of the country, particularly center-south, that includes Mexico City, but also in the central north part of the country and in the west, while AY26 was dominant only in the northwest of Mexico. In other parts of Mexico, such as the southeast, you can see that it's very difficult to determine which one was the dominant sublineage of Delta. So this indicates that many lineages of sublineages of Delta circulated together here. Let me see. Okay. So I just wanted to end introducing a little bit of what has happened in Mexico from November on. So with the introduction of Omicron, you can see that Omicron has replaced Delta almost completely in Mexico. Sorry, as it has done in the rest of the world. And I finally want to acknowledge the people that have made possible all this work and analysis. So first of all members of CoV HenMex that have been working in different aspects of the genomic surveillance. The diversity and evolutionary data analysis that I have shown you today has been done by Blanca Taboada and myself, but I also want to acknowledge the help of Mauricio Rosales and Rodrigo Garcia Lopez that have helped produce some of the graphs I show you today. Also, there are many people in CoV that have worked in sample collection, the people in the Instituto Mexicano del Seguro Social in Mexico. So we have Esteban Muñoz and Angel Salas and all the people that work with them. In sequencing and genome assemble, we have many institutions contribute. I only mentioning the people that are in these efforts, but every one of them have a team of people working with them. So it's Alejandro Sanchez, Celia, Joel, Alfredo, Nelly, Bruno. Also to thank the COVID-19 coordinator, Dr. Carlos Arias. And finally, all the authors that have been sharing their data via the GSAID initiative from Mexico and from the rest of the world that have made possible all this data analysis. And thank you all for your attention.
Hi, Selene. Thank you for the presentation. I want to know what criteria are you using to select the samples to sequence, because we know that there is only a small portion of the diagnosed patient that are being sequenced. So basically information about that.
Yes, well, obviously it's really hard to know which samples to select. In COVID, we work primarily with samples from the IMSS. So most of our samples come from there. So, well, there have to be patients that seek care in the Instituto Mexicano del Seguro Social. So it's the public health system. And then also some people inside COVID look for the epidemiological curves in different states to try to determine which states are probably facing a surge in cases. And then that also is taken into consideration to increase the sampling in those states prior to or trying to head up a surge in cases. And also it's just availability, right? So the samples that are more easy to collect are the ones that are being included in the study. So yeah, so those are pretty much the criteria for sampling.
There seems to be a lot of sampling going on in the region, not just Mexico, and the decision that it's informing is perhaps when to open or close lockdown, and maybe whether you're going to have a third vaccine or stick to 2 vaccines. So the decisions are quite general, and there's an awful lot of sampling that's going on. So in terms of cost benefit, so is there a way of rationalizing the sampling methodology regionally or nationally, just to inform policy? Or is the analysis of samples that you happen to get because people are getting COVID? I mean, is there a more cost-effective way to inform policy than what's in place at the moment?
Yes, I think it could be much more, it could be done in a more cost-effective way if there was a more homogeneous sampling. strategy. So one of the problem is that obviously we have an excess of sampling in large cities of Mexico, like Mexico City, where not only CoV but other groups are sequencing. But these are also the samples that are more readily available. So I think that if you could ensure a more homogeneous sequencing throughout all the country, and also that will give you more information probably than with the same number of sequences that we have today, no? Because we have a huge bias in where the samples are coming from. Saying all that, I think that one of the problems of including more geographically even sampling are the cost of getting the samples to the sequencing places. So also if you have smaller sequencing efforts distributed throughout all Mexico, it will be more cost effective because you will have more rapid results, and you will also have not have to wait for the samples to arrive, and don't have to invest money in this sample shipping. So I think it would be there are some ways where we could improve that, but one of them I think goes through having the ability to have sequencing sites distributed throughout Mexico that give you faster results on which variants are circulating where.
Selene, we'll look forward to having you in the discussion later on also.
Sure. Well, thank you all for your attention.